Good morning and welcome to North London. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here, and it's a particular pleasure for me to be Guardian adjacent for perhaps the first time in my life. We shape buildings, Winston Churchill argued, and then they shape us. The quality of the homes that we live in, the physical nature of our neighborhoods, the design of our communities determines so much. Our health, our happiness, our prosperity, our productivity, all depend on where we live. That is why housing policy, the building of new homes, the stewardship of existing properties, the planning of our towns, the fundamental landscape of our lives requires long-term thinking and a long-term plan. In the months that I've been in this role, we've been developing and implementing just such a plan. Today, I want to outline the ambitions that that plan embodies and the critical next steps that we need to take over the years to come to build a better Britain. A Britain with many more homes, an assured path to home ownership, and homes in the right places. Our long-term plan has 10 principles. The regeneration and renaissance of the hearts of 20 of our most important towns and cities. Supercharging Europe's science capital. Building beautiful and making architecture great again, building great public services into the heart of every community, communities taking back control of their future, greener homes, greener landscapes, and greenbelt protection, a new deal for tenants and landlords, ensuring that every home is safe, decent, and warm, liberating leaseholders, and extending ownership to a new generation. Our long-term plan for housing comes at a critical moment for the housing market. We have a record of delivery. We've built more homes over our time in office than Labour did under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. In this Parliament, we've delivered the highest number of new homes in a year for 3 decades, and we've ensured the highest number of first-time buyers in 2 decades. And we will meet our manifesto target of delivering 1 million new homes in this Parliament. Not only that, but our 11.5 billion affordable homes programme is delivering well over 100,000 affordable homes. And we're scaling up to deliver tens of thousands of new homes specifically for social rent. But we know that there are immediate challenges to future growth. Across the developed world, there are economic pressures. And there is, therefore, a need for radical action to unlock the supply of new homes. In every Western country, inflation is a barrier to building. Inflation has pushed up the price of materials. It has required interest rates to rise. It's squeezed access to credit, and with tight labour markets across the West, construction has everywhere become more difficult. But construction is more necessary than ever. So tackling inflation is critical to the implementation of our plan. The steps the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have taken to control public spending and borrowing, and our broader fiscal and monetary strategy are working. Inflation is coming down. But we need to maintain that discipline, which is why the Labour Party's proposals to borrow an additional £28 billion every year, their failure to support sustainable pay settlements, and their policy of unilateral energy disarmament are so dangerous. Each is inflationary. Together, they would be the ingredients of an acid which would corrode the foundations of economic recovery. Instead, underpinning our long-term plan for economic recovery is a long-term plan for housing. And the first and most important component of that plan is our programme of urban regeneration and a new inner-city renaissance. Renaissance because we want to ensure that our cities have all the ingredients for success that we identified in our Levelling Up white paper last year as the Medici model. Beautiful homes, flourishing public spaces, cultural jewels, safe and orderly streets, space for trees and nature, centres of educational excellence, dynamic new businesses, and excellent public services. In our white paper, we committed to the regeneration of 20 places across England as the core of our long-term plan for housing. And today, I want to say more about how we are implementing our ambitions. We are unequivocally, unapologetically, and intensively concentrating our biggest efforts in the hearts of our cities, because that's the right thing to do, economically, environmentally, and culturally. As my colleague Neil O'Brien argued in his landmark study for the think tank Onward on housing, Green, Pleasant and Affordable, Cities are where the demand for housing is greatest. It's better for the environment, the economy, for productivity, and for well-being if we use all of the levers that we have to promote urban regeneration rather than swallowing up virgin land. That's why we will enable brownfield development rather than greenbelt erosion, sustainable growth rather than suburban sprawl. And there is a direct contrast here between our approach and Labour's. Labour politicians, with a few exceptions, have failed to deliver housing in urban areas, most conspicuously here in inner London. Their policy now is to cover up that failure by ending protection for the greenbelt, encouraging the sort of thoughtless, piecemeal, sequential development which will only mean low-quality development sprawling out from existing settlements without proper infrastructure or regard to our environment. The approach that Labour now embrace pits communities against growth rather than unlocking real progress. And it's especially unconvincing when so many Labour frontbenchers have themselves campaigned directly against development in their own constituencies. It's a case of do what I say, not what I have done, at least until their next change of policy. So the economic and environmental imperatives all point towards a move away from a land-hungry destruction of natural habitats in favour of a much more efficient regeneration of our cities. And in the UK, we've been markedly inefficient in this regard, inefficient in how we use land. In recent years, the rates of house building in rural areas have been greater than in urban areas. And in our cities, especially those outside London, the population densities are much lower than in comparable competitor Western nations. We occupy more land with fewer people. That approach has not only been inefficient in planning terms, it's cost us in productivity. Failing to densify our inner cities means lower growth, with a 10% increase in our city's population potentially unlocking a £20 billion increase in UK GDP. Failing to densify means longer commutes, a longer wait for a plumber or ambulance, and more vehicle journeys, leading to congestion and pollution. At present, only 40% of people living in our great cities can get into the city centre in 30 minutes by public transport, compared to over 2/3 of the population in comparable European cities. And we would not only be more productive, we would have an enhanced quality of life. People living and working in close proximity to one another is a key feature of the most creative, productive, and attractive cities in the world, and in particular a feature of the most attractive parts of those cities. The heart of Gaudi's Barcelona, the Haussmann Design Centre of Paris, the Nash Terraces of Regent's Park, the apartment blocks of Pimlico, Marylebone and Knightsbridge, Edinburgh's Newtown, the Upper West Side of Manhattan, or the centres of Boston or Austin, Texas, all are districts where what economists call the agglomeration effect, the mixing of talent and opportunity which sparks innovation and growth, is marked. Densification of our inner cities would not just enhance economic efficiency and free up leisure time, it would also help with climate change. Denser cities on the American eastern seaboard emit 50% less carbon than the suburban and ex-urban areas near them. That's why we've been developing and implementing policies explicitly designed to support urban regeneration. We've given our metro mayors more powers and resource to build homes in our cities. We've allocated an extra £250 million to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and to the West Midlands. And we've shifted government funding already to support housing delivery, the money needed to assemble and then to remediate the land on which the private sector can then build. And this week, a further £1 billion will be launched to make brownfield land fit for development in our cities and towns, including landmark investments in Greater Manchester and the West Midlands. In addition, the new infrastructure levy, which we are legislating for in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, will further incentivise that brownfield development. Developers aiming to build on greenfield sites will have to pay more to provide for the new affordable housing and the infrastructure necessary in areas where there just aren't the roads, the GP surgeries, the schools and shops already in place. By contrast, in urban areas where the infrastructure already exists, and indeed in London where school rolls are falling in the heart of the city, densification and growth can ensure existing public services thrive and remain sustainable. And to make it cheaper for development to deliver more affordable housing, more schools and hospitals when it's right for the community, our Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill will eliminate the hope value that landowners and property speculators try to extract from any sale. And we're already supporting gentle densification of existing areas of housing through our proposal for street votes, where local communities can collectively decide to extend their homes to capture more value and to create more space for new householders or bigger families. We're also consulting on new and expanded permitted development rights to maximise the potential of existing buildings for new homes. And as I look forward to publishing the updated National Planning Policy Framework a little bit later this year, we're looking at how we can support more development on small sites to support more upward construction with existing beautiful street design. And we want to see agreed development and plans go ahead on locally agreed sites. We are then also tackling at source some of the reasons that have held back investment in the flats and the apartment blocks that help urban regeneration and densification. In the aftermath of the Grenfell fire, the market for many properties in our cities froze because of the fire safety issues which had gone unaddressed for years. That meant that householders were in the terrible position where they couldn't sell their homes until they had a commitment that remediation would be undertaken. We took decisive steps to unfreeze the market, to protect leaseholders, to get developers to pay for that remediation, and to prompt lenders to start offering mortgages on those properties once more. And today we're taking further steps by opening our new cladding safety scheme and also providing much desired clarity to builders that 18 metres will be the new threshold that we will introduce for new buildings requiring second staircases. And of course there'll be transitional arrangements in place to make sure that there is no disruption to housing supply. All of these building safety measures have got a vital sector of our urban housing market moving again, and that lays the ground for the further expansion we now need. Because we know that there have recently been successful examples of the sort of urban regeneration that I've been envisaging. The wonderful King's Cross redevelopment in London, where we are today, the transformation of central Manchester, the Riverside development in Newcastle. But as I've explained, we must now go further. While some local leaders have set the pace in building homes in urban areas, with Andy Street in the West Midlands exceeding the numbers assessed as necessary for his authority, delivery elsewhere is behind where we need to be. London, under Sadiq Khan, has a particularly poor record. The London plan identified capacity for around 52,000 new homes annually. But in recent years, London has been building as few as 30,000 homes a year. The Labour Mayor's failure on housing, like his failure on crime and his failure on transport, undermines the vitality and attractiveness of our capital. And that holds back the whole country. I support the mayoral model, but I also will not hesitate to act in the national interest when Labour politicians fail. The number of homes that we need in London is only likely to rise beyond the 52,000 that already there is provision for in the plan. But these homes, as I say, are not being delivered. And the Mayor's failure to turbocharge the redevelopment of inner-city London is putting further pressure on the suburbs. If just 5% of the capital's built-up area had the density of Maida Vale, it could host an additional 1.2 million people without the need to expand outwards. That is why we now need, in London, to emulate the ambitious approach that Margaret Thatcher and Michael Heseltine took to London Docklands. We're planning to intervene, using all the arms of government to assemble land, provide infrastructure, set design principles, master plan over many square miles, and bring in the most ambitious players in the private sector to transform landscapes which are ripe for renewal. Our ambition in London is a Docklands 2.0, an eastward extension along the Thames of the original Heseltine vision, taking in the regeneration of Charlton Riverside and Thamesmead in the south, and the area around Beckton and Silvertown to the north. Tens of thousands of new homes can be created. Beautiful, well-connected homes and new landscaped parkland are integral to our vision, all sympathetic to London's best traditions. We will look at how we can ensure better transport connections from east to west to crowd in local and private investment. And we will build on the best evidence of how and where to invest ourselves in the future. Making sure that we unlock all the potential of London's urban centre, while also preserving the precious low-rise and richly green character of its suburbs, such as Barnet and Bromley, is critical to the nation's future success. And because it's a mission of national importance, I want to work with the Mayor to ensure that we do have a London plan, a housing and development blueprint for the capital, worthy of the task. We can do it together. The Dockland 2.0 sites that we've identified and of course the new homes and investment that we will also bring to Old Oak Common are in line with the GLA's own ambitions. But we owe it to Londoners and to the nation's economic well-being to get this right, to regenerate inner and East London while protecting the character of family life in the suburbs and our green spaces, which is why I reserve the right to step in, to reshape the London plan if necessary, and to consider every tool in our armoury, including development corporations. London will, of course, also see the benefits of this government's decision to allow the Affordable Homes programme to be directed towards regeneration for the first time, with up to £1 billion available in London alone, as part of a transformative reform that will change how we level up communities across the country. Because while London is the world's most attractive capital for new investment and a national asset beyond price, the country will only succeed if our other cities also secure the investment needed to raise their productivity faster. And that is why in our programme of 20 city centre renewals, the Midlands, and particularly the north of England, are our future focus. In Leeds, we will, over the next decade, bring comprehensive regeneration to the city centre, working with the local authority to build new homes in areas such as the South Bank, the Innovation Arc, and Mabgate. We'll work with the Department for Transport to unlock wider development on the land which is currently being safeguarded for transport projects, and we will also progress work on a mass transit system, providing better links within the city and between Leeds and Bradford, and indeed Kirklees, through our £96 billion integrated rail plan. And we will continue to support the rapid regeneration of Manchester, with £150 million to unlock brownfield land and a trailblazing £400 million devolved housing investment. We also have a new partnership with Great British Railways that will turbocharge travel on the newly integrated B network, rolling out in full by 2030. We want to provide the modern homes and the rapid transport system that Manchester needs. And it's not just in Leeds and Manchester. In Sheffield and in Wolverhampton, we're already active, with £160 million of investment unlocking homes and wider regeneration, including the City Learning Quarter in Wolverhampton, where I hope to be later today, and Castlegate in Sheffield. In the months ahead, we'll be working with other great cities to ensure that we have the development vehicles and the ambition necessary for further regeneration. And in each case, we want to use the planning and tax levers provided by our new investment zones to help drive activity. And we will work with metro mayors to align the new housing that we envisage with the wider economic development that they are helping to drive. And we will also ensure that new homes are built in line with the best urbanist principles of gentle densification. That means new urban quarters of terraced houses and thoughtful apartment blocks, the Haussmann-style transformation of existing urban space. And this programme will make vividly real the vision that I mentioned in our Levelling Up white paper, ensuring that cities outside London, which are rich in talent, but which do not enjoy the same level of productivity as cities in other jurisdictions, get the rich mix of financial, human, cultural and social capital which will drive growth. And it's not just Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield and Wolverhampton and existing great cities where we see new opportunities opening in the north. Barrow in Cumbria is the home of engineering excellence, the site of significant new investment over the next 4 decades, and of course it will be building the submarines of the future through the historic AUKUS deal. We want Barrow to be a new powerhouse of the north, extending beyond its current boundaries with thousands of new homes and space for new businesses to benefit from the scientific and technical expertise already clustered there. The Cabinet Secretary will be in Barrow later this week with an elite civil service team to meet with local leaders and the superb local MP Simon Fell to scope out the room for significant further expansion and investment. Because making the most of our science strengths is vital to Britain's future. And of course, the establishment of the new Department of Science, Innovation and Technology under Michelle Donlan, the new AI task force under Ian Hogarth, and the amazing life science breakthroughs that enable the vaccine task force work during COVID. All of these are examples of how we lead the world in science, and all are essential to our future prosperity and well-being. And we know that we have wonderful sites of scientific innovation across the country, in the West Midlands, in Liverpool, and in the North East. But of course, nowhere is more central to our scientific leadership than Cambridge. Cambridge has been one of the intellectual centres of the world for 8 centuries, the home of Newton, Widdowson, Rutherford, Crick, Watson, Franklin, Venki Ramakrishnan, and Richard Henderson. the birthplace of generations of innovation. But Cambridge's future potential has been circumscribed by a lack of new space for lab capacity and research activity, and also by the constraints on new housing, which have priced new graduates out of the market and have also made attracting and retaining talent harder. While Cambridge's growth has been held back, its rivals abroad have benefited. In 2021, Boston had 6 million square feet of lab space under development. In an average year, Cambridge and Oxford together manage just 300,000 square feet. In Cambridge today, you have to wait almost a year for the next available lab space, and that's no way to incubate the dynamic technological innovators that we sorely need. So this government will now start to write the next expansive chapter in Cambridge's story of scientific endeavour. We're going to develop a vision for Cambridge, a vision that will involve growing beautiful, integrated neighbourhoods and healthy communities while supercharging innovation and protecting green spaces. I'm delighted today to be able to appoint Peter Freeman, the chair of Homes England, and one of the country's foremost delivery experts when it comes to new development, to lead this effort, under a Cambridge delivery group backed by £5 million to start the scoping work. In concert with national and local partners, Peter will be charged with crafting the detailed vision for Cambridge's future, what it means for housing and for businesses, including those technology and life sciences firms, what it means for transport, critically what it means for water supply and for public services, and just as importantly, what a new vision can offer for healthy living, for green spaces, and for cultural institutions. I've asked Peter to advise me on what the right long-term delivery vehicle needs to look like as well, because I don't underestimate the scale of the task. And just as the Olympics succeeded thanks to the right leadership and structure, so too will delivery of this vision require the expertise, focus, and momentum of a dedicated, freestanding organisation, one that can develop the master plan, enforce high-quality design standards, acquire land, approve planning, and work with developers. It will be for Peter and his new team to take forward the vision for Cambridge. But I want to take a moment to paint a picture of the kind of evolution that we want to see in the city by 2040, so that the scale of our intent is clear. First, imagine a major new quarter for the city, built in a way that is in keeping with the beauty of the historic centre, one shaped by the principles of high-quality design, urban beauty, and human-scale streetscapes, emulating the scale and quality of neighbourhoods such as Clifton and Bristol or Marylebone and London, with a high proportion of affordable homes and other properties set aside for key workers and young academics. Then connect that new quarter to the rest of the city with a sustainable transport network that sees current congestion becoming a thing of the past, drawing on Cambridge's existing strengths in promoting cycling and walking, allowing for faster and easier travel in and around the city, including to science and business parks. Then think about expanding existing commercial infrastructure so that the constraints that businesses currently face, including on lab capacity, are removed, supporting more jobs and more growth. Next, turn your mind's eye to how the environment might look in which those living and working in Cambridge will spend their evenings and weekends, adding to Parker's Peace, Jesus Green and the Botanic Garden, a substantial new green space that rivals not just the royal parks of the capital, but the best urban parks in the world. And in the wider region, we could support some of our most remarkable nature reserves, such as Wicken Fen, with what could become a new national park. Finally, we can envisage new centres for culture, perhaps a natural history museum, or a genuinely world-class concert hall, proudly taking their place alongside some of Cambridge's existing institutions, such as the Fitzwilliam and the Scott Polar. That is the kind of Cambridge that I want to see come 2040. And under Peter's leadership, the hard work to deliver against that ambition starts today. But to achieve success in this vision of Cambridge, like everywhere else, we need homes that are accepted and wanted by their local communities. And core to that acceptance must be a new philosophy of community-led housing that's beautifully designed to match local character, has local input, and respects the local environment. That's why we've established a powerful new body to drive building beautifully, the Office for Place, which will find its home in Stoke-on-Trent. This new body, led by the brilliant urbanist Nick Boyce-Smith, will ensure that new places are created in accordance with the very best design principles, that we are placemaking and not just house building. For the first time, communities will be enabled to demand from developers what they find beautiful and banish what they find ugly. And we will support the thoughtful stewardship and repurposing of existing buildings. As my department has demonstrated, it is both right environmentally and aesthetically to protect and preserve existing beautiful buildings and make it easier for their use to change and evolve. And we know that communities will welcome development when it's beautiful. I saw for myself in Poundbury the support that exists for the right sort of major development if it's properly master planned and well designed. And that's why I'm so glad that the spirit of Poundbury is animating new garden towns and villages across the country, like the outstanding Wellbourne development in Hampshire, championed by my colleague Suella Braverman. 6,000 new homes, delivered to a design blueprint shaped by the landscape architect Kim Wilkie and the aesthetic genius Ben Pentreath. It provides a model for the future. More garden towns and villages built on similar lines, master planned to be communities that anyone would aspire to live in. That is critical to our future. And we will go further to empower communities to build beautiful in the places that they already love, supporting people to build homes themselves by scaling up the role of community land trusts and also making more resource available to support custom and self-built homes. We will also support communities to ensure that the beautiful new homes they want are delivered rapidly. Through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, we are simplifying and speeding up the process of updating local plans. But of course, in order to do that, that means investing in quality planning. So today, we are more than doubling our funding to bust planning backlogs with over £24 million of additional investment. And also, we're creating a new super squad of expert planners, backed by £13 million of new funding to unblock major housing and infrastructure developments. This team will first land in Cambridge to turbocharge development that contributes to our vision for the city. But it will also look at sites across our 8 investment zones in England to help provide high-quality homes which complement the high-quality jobs that are being created. As you can see, we believe in speed and scale. Speed and scale matter, but our pursuit of quantity must not involve, as I've always stressed, any compromise on quality. Too often in the past, we have met housing targets, but in the wrong way, ignoring the need for beautiful and well-constructed homes. Many of the homes which were built at speed and on a significant scale in the 50s and 60s were brutalist blocks or soulless estates. Many are now unsafe, poorly insulated, and prone to damp and mold. And they're also alienating environments rather than loved neighborhoods. We must learn the lessons from these past failures as we build for the future. We must ensure that new builds are of the highest quality and also that renovation work proceeds apace in our existing housing stock so that everyone can have a safe, decent and warm home that meets their family's needs. So for new build homes, we will roll out new design codes, and later this year, we will consult on a universal future home standard, deliver comfortable homes built to be zero carbon, warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And we will continue, of course, to improve life for those in existing homes. We've reduced the number of non-decent homes by 2.5 million since 2010, but we must go further. We will now more rigorously hold social landlords to account for providing quality homes for their tenants and renovating the stock they have. Because the tragic death of Abab Ishak demonstrated that we need to act, and we in central government need to regulate more robustly. Just last week, our social housing regulation bill became law, and that requires social landlords to respond to serious hazards like damp and mould within new, strict time limits. And of course, we'll penalise those social landlords who fail to make homes decent, with new unlimited fines for failing landlords and the removal of house building subsidies where social landlords are not keeping their existing stock in good repair. And of course, we will also update the decent home standard and apply it to the private rented sector for the first time, tackling the fifth of homes which still do not meet basic standards of inhabitability. Through all of these interventions, we recognise that a house is not just an asset to be traded, but a home to be loved. Countries around the world have always recognised that thoughtful, focused regulation is vital to ensure that everyone involved in the housing market benefits. And that, of course, is why we've also introduced legislation in the private rented sector to deliver a fairer deal for both landlords and tenants. For tenants, we will implement our manifesto commitment to end no-fault evictions, protecting those currently afraid to ask their landlord for basic repairs for fear of losing their home. And we will also help landlords deal with tenants who abuse their position, expanding landlords' ability to evict antisocial tenants or those who willfully refuse to pay rent. And a new ombudsman will provide quicker, cheaper redress alongside reformed court processes which ensure landlords can get their properties back quickly when they need them back. Action again to get our housing market to work. But making the housing market work better will also require fundamental reforms to leasehold law. We want to ensure that those who paid for their home by acquiring a leasehold can finally truly own their own home by becoming free of an outdated feudal regime which has been holding them back. So we will continue action on exploitative ground rents, expand leaseholders' ability to enfranchise and to take back control from distant freeholders. We will reduce punitive legal service charges, reduce insurance costs, and improve transparency, all in new legislation to be in the King's Speech. And of course, this new legislation, these changes to leasehold law, will mean that true home ownership is extended to millions more. But it is also critical to our long-term housing plan to get many more people on a sustainable path to home ownership. Most recently, of course, we've backed existing buyers facing hardship. The Chancellor has worked with lenders to help owners facing temporary difficulties to stay in their homes. And he's extended mortgage interest support to help those who are most vulnerable and who need a helping hand. But through backing British first-time buyers across the country through the tax and planning system, we're also planning to extend the ladder opportunity to many more by prioritising first-time buyers for homes over those with multiple properties, over those seeking to convert family homes into holiday lets, and over speculative buyers who've been seeking to invest only to inflate property prices. Because the Conservative Party is the party of home ownership. We've helped already over 750,000 people to buy their first home since 2010 through programmes including Help to Buy, Right to Buy and shared ownership, and we will go further later this year. All of these steps that we're taking on ownership, on leasehold reform, on decency, on beauty, on simplifying planning procedures, expanding planning capacity, and on regenerating and reviving our inner cities are the components of a long-term plan for safe, decent, warm, beautiful homes for all. In the weeks and months ahead, we'll be saying more and delivering more. The comprehensive and coherent nature of our plan demonstrates a seriousness of intent in improving the supply of new homes that I fear the opposition simply don't have. Labour's approach is to return to the failures of the past, to encourage urban sprawl, to ignore environmental imperatives, to omit the need for new infrastructure, to avoid the rigorous work of thoughtful master planning, to neglect the need for urban regeneration, to duck the leadership required to think big, and to forget the importance of beauty and community. Their policies would encourage resistance to development, not incentivize it. They would weaken communities, not strengthen them, and they would see the biggest economic prizes elude our grasp. That's why we are committed to a better way, acting at every level with a vision of national renewal. Hundreds of thousands of new homes, built from Barrow-in-Furness to Barking Riverside, Wolverhampton to West Yorkshire, beautiful new neighbourhoods and thoughtfully landscaped new quarters in our historic cities, proving to the world that the energy and ambition of our Victorian ancestors has now been superseded by a matchless modern spirit of endeavour. This is a plan to build a better Britain, and it is a plan that we are determined to deliver. Thank you. And as the lights dim behind me and as they glow over the audience, I know that there are a number of people here who'd like to ask questions. Can I go first of all to Jonathan Blake from the BBC? Jonathan.
Mr. Gove, is your focus on cities more to do with the fact that fewer Conservative voters tend to live there and an admission of failure, that you can't get the homes built in rural areas and towns that are needed because of continued opposition from your own MPs?
Well, there are lots of Conservative voters who live in cities, including in Uxbridge, where Conservative voters returned a new MP, Steve Tuckwell, just last week. So I would challenge the first of the assumptions there. But no, as I've outlined, regenerating cities makes sense economically. If we want to see the dynamic effects that you get in the most thriving places in the world, then we need to regenerate our cities. We need more people in them. Our cities, London, but particularly other cities, are simply less buzzy, less dense, less attractive than the hearts of cities in some other countries. And we need to reverse that. We've already seen what can happen when you have the right sort of urban regeneration here in King's Cross. And to be fair, we've also seen the revival of central Manchester under the leadership of people like Howard Bernstein, Richard Leese, and Andy Burnham now. What we need to do is to make sure that we have the same spirit elsewhere. But of course, it's not just in cities. While we are concentrating on them, because it's right for the economy and right for the environment, more sustainable, it is also the case that new, beautiful garden towns and cities like Wellbourne, which I've mentioned, are a critical part of our proposals as well. Can I go now to Skye and to Ali Fortescue?
Thank you. You are a politician that I think is known to, on occasion, give a more direct answer to a direct question. So I'm hoping you can give us a direct answer to this. Do you stand by the government's commitment to build 300,000 homes a year by the middle of the 2020s, or is it, as a former Conservative housing minister said, a target that's going to be missed by a country mile? And can I also ask, this morning Conservative MP in Cambridge tweeted to say that he will do everything he can to stop this government nonsense. Are you willing to be tough enough with your backbenchers, or will you bend again to Conservatives that don't want houses built in their constituency?
The 300,000 target by the middle of this decade is one I completely stand by. And it will be the case, I'm sure, that Conservative backbenchers and others, once they have a chance to look at our plans, will realise that this is in the national interest, and that's why we're acting. Can I ask Dan Hewitt of ITV next?
Thank you, Mr. Gove. Just on to the detail, you talk about converting commercial properties, takeaways. Has the government done an assessment on how many homes it thinks can be built by converting commercial properties into homes as part of this plan? You talk about the 300,000 homes a year target. The government has not hit that in a single year since you come into power. We have a housing crisis now on multiple levels. Why should voters believe a word of what you've just said? Well,
I hope that people will realise that when I say that we're going to take decisive action, whether it's on building safety or in any other area, action follows. And the 300,000 target is one that we are building towards. I pointed out in my speech that the highest level of house building that we'd had for 3 decades came in the lifetime of this government. Now, I recognise, as everyone does, that inflation makes delivery against that target more difficult. That's why it's more important than ever that we have a long-term plan that covers a variety of different areas. You're right that permitted development rights, making sure that some of the department stores of our high streets, which are now empty, are turned into attractive new homes, for example, will be a critical component part of that, but only one part of that. We expect that there will be thousands of new homes as a result of the extension of permitted development rights. But some of the developments that I've outlined here, for example, in the east of London, will bring tens of thousands of new homes on stream. And as I say, it is for Peter Freeman and his team to let us know how big expansion in Cambridge can be. It will be for other partners in Barrow and elsewhere to let us know what the scale of their ambitions are. But I'm confident we are on a trajectory to reach that 300,000 target. I'm also confident that, as I mentioned earlier, we will hit the ambition of 1 million new homes having been built in this Parliament, which was our manifesto commitment.
300,000 target?
As soon as we possibly can. I'm going to turn now to Tom Harwood from GB News.
Thank you, Mr. Gove. Millions of people in the country are suffering the acute effects of this country's housing shortage. You've outlined some areas of progress, but they're specific. They're top-down. It's a piecemeal plan. Is this, when you compare it to the sweeping planning reform that the Labour Party is proposing, simply too little, too late?
No, I don't think that the Labour Party are putting forward a sweeping planning reform at all. All they have said is that they want to see greenbelt land swallowed up. That form of development, as we've seen in the past, that piecemeal sequential development has led to the erosion of environmental assets. It's led to communities opposing development, and it hasn't provided the scale of growth that we need. I wouldn't describe the extension of development out across the Thames estuary in the way that we've done as anything other than ambitious on a Heseltinian scale. I wouldn't describe the transformation that we envisage in Leeds, or the growth of Barrow, or the significant growth that we expect to see around Cambridge as piecemeal. And nor is this top-down. What it is a determined effort by national government to work with local communities in order to unlock the homes that we need. In my speech today, I've outlined a coherent plan which takes into account not just the role that national government can play and the partnership that we require for local government, but also the other levers that we need in order to get our housing market moving, discussing everything from unblocking planning backlogs to how we can get higher quality design and a more beautiful aesthetic in new development. All of these together are required. Labour don't come anywhere near that. Can I go to Dan Martin from the Daily Telegraph?
Hi, can I just go back to the MP for South Cambridgeshire? He says your plans for building homes around Cambridge are nonsense. If that's the case, how are you going to get them through?
Well, I have the greatest respect for all of Cambridgeshire's MPs, but the plans that we've outlined today are plans which the overwhelming number of those looking at Cambridge's economic situation, I'm sure, will find a compelling way forward. We can't have Cambridge, an exceptional city, being held back. We know that when we have Cambridge, Massachusetts, offering an alternative for investment on the scale that it is capable of offering, that we need change. And the members of Parliament for Cambridgeshire, all of whom are friends of mine, I'm looking forward to discussing our plans with in order to make sure that we can have the maximum level of consensus and support for the work that Peter Freeman and others will undertake. And I think it's Kamal Jaffer from the Daily Mail who wants to come in next. Kamal.
Hi, yeah, you alluded to the Renters Reform Bill during your speech. What would you say to renters who say it's simply taking too long regarding their desperate situation? And what would you say to some of your own colleagues who have publicly and privately come out against it?
Well, I think the first thing to say is you're right. The Renters Reform Bill was a manifesto commitment, getting rid of Section 21 no-fault evictions. I've always wanted to get on with that, but we have plans to bring the Renters Reform Bill forward shortly, and that change will, I think, benefit both tenants and landlords. I know that some people have expressed concerns about aspects of the bill, but when I've found myself in rooms with those who've expressed concerns in the past, as we've gone through the detail, then many of those concerns have gone, and indeed people have become enthusiasts for the legislation. Now, the legislation comes against a backdrop where there are difficulties, of course, in the housing market as a result of interest rate rises. That is why it is so important that our commitment to getting inflation down comes in parallel with the Renters Reform Bill. Any other questions? I think Andy Bell from Channel 5 News.
Thanks very much. Andy Bell, 5 News. Isn't the only way to make your plans happen to say to people like the Cambridgeshire MPs or even the local residents, too bad, you've got to put up with it, we're doing it anyway? Are you prepared to do that, to make your plans happen?
Well, I believe in taking people with us, and I believe that the vision that we've outlined is one that will command support. I think one of the reasons why people have resisted development in the past, in fact, there are several. Firstly, because new homes haven't been beautiful. Secondly, because they haven't had the infrastructure alongside them. Thirdly, because they haven't taken account of the need to make sure that we safeguard and enhance our environment. And fourthly, because when we've been building new homes, not new neighbourhoods. All of those concerns, legitimate concerns, I believe are addressed by the plan, the vision that we've outlined today. And we know that there is demand for Cambridge to grow economically and in terms of new housing. So I hope that we'll be able to take people with us. But as I mentioned earlier, we will look at what the most appropriate delivery vehicle is in order to make sure that the expansion that we need to see goes ahead.
So if you can't take people with you, you will push it through?
Again, I'm convinced that we will be able to take people with us. And yes, I was going to say, is that Richard Vaughan from The Independent? The Eye, sorry.
Thank you. Some of your Conservative colleagues would actually like you to go faster and suggest paying local residents to allow development. What are your thoughts on that, incentivising them through cold hard cash?
I don't believe in paying people to incentivise development, but I do believe that our new infrastructure levy is an effective way of making sure that when development occurs, more of the uplift in land value that occurs when planning permission is granted goes to the community for the community to be able to spend on the infrastructure it needs. And I think that's right. I think that in the balance hitherto, too much of the value when planning permission is being granted has gone to the landowner or to the developer. Don't blame them, it's just the way the system works. But we need a more equitable approach, and that's what the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill does. Yes, sorry, in the front row.
Thank you. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. I've got a couple of questions. The first is, you obviously took the decision last year to make the 300,000 homes a year target voluntary rather than compulsory. Will you commit to publishing the impact assessment that must have gone on around that decision? Secondly, on leaseholder reform, you've outlined a series of measures that you say move towards bringing an end to what you call a feudal system. When can people expect an actual end to the leasehold system in England?
On the first one, a gentle correction. It's very rare The Guardian will ever get anything wrong. I know it has a reader's editor on those rare occasions that helps to ensure that the record is corrected. We haven't changed our ambitions, our target on 300,000 at all. There's been no change to that. There have been specific changes that we envisage in the National Planning Policy Framework, which will allow those making local plans to take particular account of environmental constraints when meeting the numbers that the standard model produces, but that doesn't affect the 300,000 target. On the second point, what we want to do is to make sure that leaseholders can effectively own their properties, first of all through making enfranchisement easier, getting rid of marriage value, and also capping ground rents, so that people are the true owners of their property. It will still be the case that the legal existence of leasehold and freehold will still be there, but people will effectively be liberated and leasehold will effectively be ended. Yes, just in the third row.
I'm Amelia Dunn from Channel 4 News. You've just said that you stand by your commitment to build 300,000 homes by the mid-2020s. The Levelling Up Committee says that that's almost impossible, given you've now dropped that mandatory target. And the property giant Knight Frank says this policy will lead to the building of only hundreds of new homes, not hundreds of thousands that are needed. Is it not the case that the numbers simply don't add up?
Well, as I mentioned to your colleague from The Guardian, we haven't dropped the 300,000 target. There are specific changes that we've made to the way in which local plans will be adopted, but we haven't altered the 300,000 target. It's a conclusion that people have drawn erroneously, if I can put it politely. But on the
mandatory.
Well, it never was. I mean, the 300,000 target remains as it always has been, and I think this is a misunderstanding, as I say. But on the specific point about the hundreds, I think that Knight Frank were commenting on the changes to permitted development rights. As I pointed out in the speech, the scale of development that we're envisaging in London, in Leeds, in Manchester, in Cambridge, in Barrow and elsewhere will mean tens of thousands of new homes. So I think the Knight Frank comments were restricted to what they envisaged the changes in PDRs would mean. But of course, I'd be more than happy to look at their report and respond more fully to them and indeed to anyone else. Yes, the gentleman just in front there.
Hi, it's Joe Mays from Bloomberg. You say you want to build 30,000 social houses a year, but many housing associations face significant levels of debt, and that will curtail their ability to build, and their position is worsening because of the weak housing market and rising interest rates. So how are you going to deliver that?
Well, we've got an 11.5 billion affordable homes programme. We will work with housing associations and indeed the private sector when they're developing and delivering new homes in order to make sure that we have affordable homes. And I've explicitly said that an 11.5 billion programme should be targeted on, or rather, it should enhance the number of homes which are there for social rent. So it won't happen this year, but it will happen in the future. Yes, the gentleman in the middle row.
Thank you. Michael Knowles from Daily Express. Lots of people would say that GP surgeries and schools are already completely oversubscribed. How can you ensure that these plans won't make that problem worse?
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why there has been resistance to development, and one of the reasons why we want thoughtful master planning. So here there is a distinction between the approach that Labour takes, which would be to add to those pressures without an answer on infrastructure, and the approach that we're taking, whereby when we're thinking about urban regeneration and the creation of new urban quarters, we're thinking about them with GP surgeries, primary schools, other services, and urban parkland and green spaces built in from the beginning. And that's the approach, for example, that they're taking to the Wellbourne development that I mentioned earlier, the approach that characterised the King's developments when he was Prince of Wales in Poundbury, Nansledden and elsewhere. Yes, a gentleman there, and a lady there and gentleman there.
Good morning. Ben Beadle from the National Residential Landlords Association. Do you agree that a thriving private rented sector is necessary to achieve your home ownership aspirations? And do you plan to address the supply and demand imbalance that we're currently seeing in the PRS and make a clear statement about ME's energy changes?
Three very good questions. Yes, a private rented sector, a healthy, vital private rented sector is vital to a functioning housing market, a well-functioning housing market. Secondly, I know that every part of the housing market, including the private rented sector, is under pressure at the moment, again, principally, but not exclusively, because of the rise in interest rates, and we're sensitive to that and always looking to see how we can help everyone in every part of the sector. And thirdly, as you quite rightly say, minimum energy efficiency standards for those in the private rented sector are likely to be made stricter, but there is a specific timetable at the moment that we have, which I believe should be relaxed, and the more detail will follow shortly. Yes.
Susanna Nicol, Build UK. All sounds a worthy ambition, but we cannot address our housing needs without a national infrastructure plan. The new hospital programme is behind schedule, the school building programme is underfunded, the power supply is insufficient, our water and sewage system is broken. I could continue. For industry to invest, we need a long-term plan for the UK. We should not become a political football. So is this part of a bigger plan for our country?
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think having a long-term plan that envisages development at scale and that thinks thoughtfully about where we're going to expand and thinks thoughtfully, as you quite rightly point out, about the way in which we can deal with unlocking the water supply that will be needed in some water-stressed parts of the country, absolutely critical, which is why tomorrow my colleague Lee Rowley will be saying more about how we advance nationally significant infrastructure projects. Lee, one of the most talented people in government, has been working on precisely the array of issues you mentioned. So I hope that Lee's work will get the attention and the support that it deserves when he says more tomorrow. And the gentleman there, and then gentleman over there, and I think...
Yeah, James Palmer from the Eastern Powerhouse.
Oh, yes.
The Eastern Powerhouse welcomes your ambition for Cambridge. We've been calling for investment into the East, in particular, to create a Silicon Valley in the east of England. Silicon Valley, though, is not just one city and one town. It's a number of linked towns. And we have in the east the energy sector, which is extraordinarily powerful, of course, as we know. We have plant botany, we have agritech, we have technological advances across the whole of the region. Are you going to not just concentrate solely on Cambridge in creating a new Silicon Valley, but looking at the whole of the region and bringing it together to create a Silicon East, which can be a true powerhouse internationally?
Well, I think you make a compelling case. And Cambridge is an exceptional place, which is why we believe that it requires an exceptional answer and an exceptional team with an exceptional leader in Peter to look at how we can thoughtfully expand it. But you're right, there are other opportunities in the east of England, renewable energy, and as you quite rightly point out, agritech, and also in Peterborough, enlightened civic leadership and a sense of aspiration and ambition, making sure that there's appropriate connectivity across the east, making sure that, for example, people from Wisbech can get to Cambridge more speedily. That has to be part of that plan, and indeed we're thinking about precisely what we can do in order to complement the specific work on Cambridge that we envisage. And yes, I think there was a gentleman there with spectacles.
Yeah, hi, Andrew Badley-Chappell from the National Custom and Self-Build Association. The biggest single difference between us and every other major economy is the lack of consumer choice when it comes to new homes. In Germany, there's a single website that says choose from 2,300 different homes from 350 different companies. Can I just urge you to do all you can to allow consumer power to deliver the better homes, the better choice, the more inspiring homes, homes that make us want to come home at the end of the day to our home, not approach that dreary, standardised, commoditised, horrendous option that is too often being offered at the moment. Thank you.
I think you've more vividly and lyrically articulated what I was trying to say, but yes is the short answer. So again, I don't want to criticise any existing player in the field because the market is as the market is. But I believe very strongly that we will unlock support for more development and we will have happier citizens if there is a greater degree of control over the aesthetic quality and the design of new buildings. Custom and self-build has to be part of that, and the work that Richard Bacon and you have done has had a powerful impact on me. But we can't just rely on custom and self-build, we need to expand that. But we also need to think hard about how we can make sure that we build attractive places, not just individual units. And in that regard, there are two professions that are vital. Planning, often regarded as a means simply of facilitating numbers, but in fact, thoughtful master planning is critical, and architecture. And again, we have a brilliant generation of architects coming up through the profession who understand the need to recapture the imagination of the population by building beautifully, and the work that the Office for Place will do under Nick Boy-Smith and others will be integral in helping in that. Yes, I think it's Henry Hill there.
Thank you. Henry Hill from Conservative Home. I've just got two quick questions. You've talked a lot about efficiency, but for young professionals, sharing a house of multiple occupancy is efficient, and that's not an optimal outcome. A spacious apartment for one person is inefficient. A family home with a large garden is inefficient, but those are both, I think we would agree, good uses of land. So where is the consideration for that balanced against efficiency in your plan? Second, you talked about London and other cities not buzzing. One reason that they don't buzz is because local authorities have no incentive to provide late licenses and restaurants in response to complaints from local residents. Now, if you're going to be increasing residential in city centres, that will put more pressure on the night economy. What steps will you take to insulate nightclubs, restaurants, bars and pubs from the complaints of their new neighbours?
I think most people in this room who know me will know that I'm a passionate supporter of nightclubs and want to do everything possible to keep them open as late as possible. But on the serious point, on the whole question of efficiency, I'm not suggesting that we coop people up like battery hens, not at all. But it is a fact that almost all of our cities are much less efficient in how they use land than comparable cities in Europe, and indeed some in the US as well. And the efficient use of land is not about trying to constrain people into smaller units. It's about making sure that you bring people closer together. And if one looks at the work of Richard Glaser, if one looks at the work of all those who've been thinking, sorry, Edward Glaser, forgive me, if one looks at the work of all those who've been looking at urban policy over the years, then it is the case that that agglomeration that comes, that buzz that is created, depends upon making sure that you have the livable, walkable neighborhoods that I referenced in the speech, whether it is in Barcelona, Paris, or indeed successfully in parts of London. So when we have a situation where the people who are living, the people who are working in the heart of Birmingham are often commuting 30 or 45 minutes to get in there, then that detracts from the significant and growing attractiveness of Birmingham's city centre. So what we need to do is to make sure that we have that buzz by bringing people together. On the whole question of licensing, I'm naturally in sympathy with your position, and I think it is the case, actually, that the more people who are currently locked out of property ownership and who can get onto the housing ladder in the areas and in the new quarters that I envisage, the more it is likely to be the case that you will have a new coalition supporting precisely the sort of nighttime economy that you, Henry, would like to see. Yes, there. Yes.
Hello, I'm Ava Santina from Politics Joe. While you're tackling the issues with supply, I was wondering if you'd made any considerations towards Sadiq Khan's call for rent controls and this new housing complex or construction that's going to go on in Silvertown and Cambridge. Has there been any consideration to maybe helping first-time buyers getting onto the ladder and preventing landlords from hoovering them all up?
Well, two things there. The first is I don't believe in rent controls. Rent controls, wherever they've been tried, have led to a constriction in supply. So you get the temporary alleviation of pain, but only at the cost of actually making the underlying situation worse. So that's another area where I, like him though I do, where I disagree with Sadiq. On the second point, we need, as I mentioned in response to Ben Beadle from the National Residential Landlords Association, we need a healthy rented sector, because we need to have, both in terms of labour mobility and for other reasons, a mix of different types of tenure within the housing market. But I did mention earlier that we have taken some steps already to ensure that it is more expensive for people to acquire a second, a third, or a fourth property than their very first property. So the system is tilted towards, quite rightly, the first-time buyer, but there is more that we can do, and more will follow. Gentleman there.
Good morning, Ben Toomey from Generation Rent. Thank you for the announcements today. I think a long-term plan is absolutely vital to get a healthier rental sector, as you say. However, the short term is also really important. We had an announcement from government 4 years ago that they would end no-fault arbitrary Section 21 evictions. What's happening right now is every 15 minutes over these summer holidays, a family is packing their bags not to go on summer holiday, but instead to find themselves getting a Section 21 eviction notice. For those families, will you make it a top priority when government and Parliament begins to sit again to bring forward the Renters Reform Bill and actually finally put an end to these evictions?
Yes, and I should say that we need to protect those people from the very small minority of bad and exploitative landlords. We absolutely need that protection as well to be brought in. But as I stressed, we also need to make sure that we support good landlords when they're dealing with the very small minority of tenants who behave badly as well. Yes, in the middle row next to the gentleman there, yeah.
Hello, Mr. Gove. I'm Sam Stewart from the Nationwide Foundation. So many things I could say to an excellent speech, thank you. But I have a request, an invitation, and then a question. So my request is regarding the permitted development rights and the expansion of those. Can I just make a request that we do not allow that to replicate the slums and the things that we cannot call homes that have been created recently and over the past decade? The invitation is you are aware of the project that we've been funding down in Bristol, We Can Make at Knoll West, which is urban densification using community-led housing. Please come on down and have a look at it. I know that you've seen the details. And the question is, you've briefly mentioned community-led housing as a foundation. We've been funding this for years. It desperately is in need of further long-term strategic funding. I just wondered whether or what role you see community-led housing in the strategy that you've outlined today.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I do take your point about PDRs, and I think that permitted development rights and a more flexible approach towards use classes overall are a really good thing in terms of unlocking supply, but we do need to learn the lessons from some of the developments that have emerged, which I think reflect some of the concerns that Henry Hill mentioned earlier as well. I'd be delighted to come to Bristol, can't commit to a date yet. And then community-led housing, yes, I completely agree. And I think, again, community land trusts and community-led housing are absolutely vital in helping to unlock supply, because the whole principle that I mentioned earlier of communities feeling that they've taken back control is critical to securing consent and indeed enthusiasm for development. And I think I'll take one last question, because I'm being told that I have to catch a train shortly. So, yes, just at the back there, the lady at the back.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question about building safety. So it's really great to hear the long-term plans. The government has the developers' pledge, My question is, do you feel government is doing enough to put pressure on developers to remediate unsafe buildings?
I think...
If I just add to it, the
Yeah.
experience on the ground, excuse me, the lived experience on the ground is still, despite developers signing up to the pledge, is housing associations spending tens of thousands every year in legal fees still trying to get developers to put right buildings that are not safe.
Well, I want to applaud, first of all, the developers who have signed the pledge. There are two who have held out, and we'll be taking action against those. But you are right, signing the pledge, making that commitment, needs to be followed up by action. My understanding is that developers are keen to get on with it, but if there are specific examples of developers or others who are dragging their feet, then please do let the department know. As I say, I want to work with them because they've made a significant commitment, but of course the most important thing is to make sure that the leaseholders and others who are currently in buildings that require remediation get action quickly. Can I just say thank you very much to you all for coming along today, and it's in the nature of a long-term plan that it will develop. There'll be more from my department, from the Treasury and from others in the weeks and months to come, but thank you all very much. Thank you.